I had lived through the Fukushima disasters in Japan in 2011, and I was living in a small coastal town when that happened, teaching English. And with the disaster, it's not just a one-off event. And I even thought that, oh, great, I survived the earthquake. Hooray, it's all over. And of course, it's 10 years on. It's the repercussions are still ongoing with the nuclear disaster. There are still massive earthquakes. A lot of people dispossessed. So after that, when I came back to Australia, I did have some difficulties, and I would get very upset about things, and I was very hypervigilant and jumpy. But my sister said to me, I think you should go see somebody. And then I got diagnosed with PTSD, and I thought, that's really weird, and okay, whatever. And then when I came to USQ and I had some students who had much worse even than that, I thought, okay, so they're reacting a little bit like I do. What can I do to make sure that I don't cause post-traumatic stress responses? So I started researching it.
You're listening to Who Is My Neighbour, a podcast by You Belong Australia. Each episode, you'll join with Sorgal and Warren to meet some of Australia's newest neighbours. You'll hear their stories, listen to their hopes and dreams, and discover the incredible courage and inspiration they bring to our communities and richly diverse Australian culture. You'll also learn from some more established Aussies too, and the joy they've found living and working alongside our refugee and migrant background neighbours.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Who Is My Neighbour.
Today I get to talk with Tori Wilson, who works at a university helping people from different language backgrounds to improve their English, some of them who actually want to study at university. It'll be really interesting, and after we've had that chat, Sorgal and I are going to have a bit more of a discussion about the things that we learned.
We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hi Tori, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Warren.
So tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Okay, so I've been teaching English as an additional language at USQ in the used to be Open Access College, now USQ College, since 2014.
Okay.
And now my official title is Manager of Called Language and Learning.
Wow.
Which basically means that I'm still teaching EAP and doing other things to help my students and also my research.
Sure. So tell us, what are your students? What's their background?
At the moment, I've just got quite a mix of different people. When I first started, we had a lot of Iraqi international students, also some Iraqi refugee students, and we had quite a few South Sudanese refugees, and we had a whole lot of Afghan students, ethnic Afghans who were born in or lived in Iran and Pakistan, and had come out here on humanitarian visas. And now, we've seen quite a few Congolese and, of course, now Syrians and Iraqi Yazidi populations, as you know, quite a lot in Toowoomba. So there's quite a big variety of students. And, of course, also we have some international students. And the international students love meeting people from different countries, because imagine the average Japanese or Korean or even Chinese, when would they have ever met somebody from one of these countries? Well, same with me. I didn't really have that opportunity much before either.
Exactly. So they've come to the college and you're teaching, do you just teach English or?
I have taught a bit of TPP, but my real passion lies in teaching English language. So I taught in ELICOS, which was some lower level students, and now I'm teaching in EAP for English for academic purposes. But, it's all the same. They're basically the same principles. The English is a bit higher each time.
So what are these students, why are they in that course? What are they hoping to do?
Lots of different things. A lot of them are hoping to go to university. Some have already been to university. Some are just trying to, they're seeing what it's like. And so some in the past have gone on to other things beside university. They might have gone out and started their own business. I have a couple of those, or they've done other courses, or found a better job than they could have if they hadn't come to learn English a bit more.
I always find it amazing that people are thinking about studying at university in a different language.
Yeah, well, I have a few things to say about that. First of all, yes, it blows my head off. And so I'm in the final year of my PhD, and one of the reasons I started my PhD was that when I first started at USQ, I had all these Iraqi students who were learning or upskilling their English so that they could do their PhDs in English. And I thought, oh my God, if they can do that, then surely I can try to do mine in my first language, because, you know, I wouldn't even consider, say, learning Arabic so that I could do a PhD in Arabic. The second thing I'll say, and I think I've forgotten that. What was the question again? Sorry.
No, I just mentioned how it was amazing that they would even attempt to do it in another language.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
The other thing is I met this student a couple of years ago at the refugee conference in Brisbane, and he did a presentation, and I was so impressed with him that he and I asked him to collaborate on a book chapter, which is coming out later this year, about refugees in higher education. And he said when he was on the plane landing in Melbourne from Syria, the first thing he thought of was, when will I be able to get back to uni?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, I've met a lot of students like that. And that's, you know, they either were already at uni and had that interrupted, or they didn't have that opportunity, but it's something that they've desperately wanted to do. And unfortunately, sometimes there's a bit of a deficit attitude on the behalf of educators that, they've had interrupted education or limited education or just any kind of excuse. But if you actually talk to students and find out their backgrounds and their capacity to learn, even students I know who didn't have much schooling, some of them, oh my God, they just pick up things really quickly, and they're just so bright, and they're just so excited to learn. Yeah, I've had a lot of refugee background students like that from all kinds of countries.
It's challenging, I guess, for us, isn't it? It's like, wow, gosh, here I am complaining about this little thing I've got to do, and and actually, it makes me angry, because the attitudes of some people, I mean, in the general community and sometimes in education, I mean, last week on the ABC, they had a couple of people, we had the lockdown for 2.5 days for COVID. Oh my God, we were trapped inside for 2 days and we couldn't wait to get out and get back to the pub. Oh my God, freedom. And I just, that kind of thing flabbergasts me. I think most Australians, we're pretty spoiled and pretty lucky and have not much perspective. Yeah, for sure. Tori, tell us a little bit about your area of expertise. We were chatting before, and it's a very specialist area, isn't it? This trauma-informed English. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when I first came to USQ, and as I said, I had a lot of students from Iraq, but also from South Sudan and Afghanistan, and pretty soon they started telling me some of their stories, which just blew my mind, because I guess maybe I had a pretty sheltered life. I mean, I grew up in Brisbane. I lived in one house for 20 years in my childhood. My mum worked a bit with refugees. She was in childcare, and her first little child was a Cambodian refugee who'd been born in a camp. So I had a little bit, but really I'd had a pretty sheltered life. And these students were telling me their stories, and I just was really shocked. And at the same time, I had lived through the Fukushima disasters in Japan in 2011, and I was living in a small coastal town when that happened, teaching English. And with the disaster, it's not just a one-off event, and I even thought that, oh great, I survived the earthquake, hooray, it's all over. And of course, it's 10 years on, it's the repercussions are still ongoing with the nuclear disaster. There are still massive earthquakes, a lot of people dispossessed. So after that, when I came back to Australia, I did have some difficulties, and I would get very upset about things, and I was very hypervigilant and jumpy. And but my sister said to me, "I think you should go see somebody." And then I got diagnosed with PTSD, and I thought, that's really weird. And okay, whatever. And then when I came to USQ, and I had some students who had much worse even than that, I thought, okay, so they're reacting a little bit like I do. What can I do to make sure that I don't cause post-traumatic stress responses? So I started researching it, and I found that there wasn't all that much in the field of English language teaching, especially for adults. And what there was not from the student's perspective. So I was encouraged by a couple of people to turn it into a PhD, and that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
Wow.
And so about a year left.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So I hear you haven't actually finished the study yet, but what have you learnt so far that we're not all academics? So perhaps just for everybody listening.
Sure,
what sort of
Professor
things?
Warren,
Yeah,
literally.
some of us are academics. What kind of things should we keep in mind when we're trying to help people who've experienced that kind of trauma?
So there's a framework by a professor of psychiatry called Derrick Silove, and he's at Uni of New South Wales, and he's worked a lot with different refugee populations and survivors of all kinds of different trauma, and he's published loads of things, and he's just amazing. So he came up with this framework of pillars that have to be restored for trauma survivors to be able to recover. And if these pillars are missing, it's going to make recovery a lot more difficult. So these are things like safety and security, and not just physical safety, but emotional safety. There is bonds and relationships and networks, and bonds and networks, I think is how he puts it.
Yeah. So that sort of thing it sounds like it's something most of us can do.
Yeah,
about,
that's
right?
the thing, and that's what he said. He says explicitly, trauma should not just be, quick, send in a psychologist. Everybody has a role to play. So his things are safety, security, bonds and networks, roles and identities, justice and existential meaning. And there are a couple of other things that other trauma researchers have written about, and they're things like trust, and sometimes choices, but choices can be a double-edged sword, and I'm finding that in my research. Some especially will say, don't make me decide, it's too overwhelming.
Okay.
And
All right.
yeah, I can definitely relate to that. But yeah, it is something that we can all think about. And just to give you a quick example, I remember years ago I had there were a few sisters in my class, and they had been lifelong refugees and then come to Australia. And they had done English classes, some of them in the same class, but sometimes separately. And they were about to do their final course, and two of the sisters were put in one class together in the same level, and the other one in the same level was put in a different one. And I think if you just, a school kid, and you say to the teacher, I want to be with my friend, and they say, just get over it, and all right. But this was very traumatizing for this young woman, and I tried to get them all together, and she said, I know we won't be together after this class. I just want to be with my family one last time, because the government where she grew up, they had always tried to split up the family, and she felt like it was happening again. And this was extremely distressing. And the person who made the decisions, not seeing that trauma, seeing through a trauma lens, just said, well, basically tough luck. But that kind of thing, when you know somebody's background, or even if you just listen to even if you just see them and you can see how traumatized they are, don't make these rules for an arbitrary reason.
Yeah.
That we have to be more human in our decision making. That's what it comes down to, really.
That's I think something that we can all think through, right? You don't need.
No.
I appreciate you're doing a PhD on that subject, but to just make more human decision-making, think of people as people.
And that's what, to be honest, I keep alternating between thinking, this PhD is just stating the obvious, and then seeing something happen out there and going, oh my God, I do need to do this PhD because people are still just making bad decisions and just treating people just as, numbers.
Yeah.
And,
sure.
oh, well, this is the rule and this is the procedure and this is the this, instead of this is a human being and they can't leave their whole life outside the classroom. I mean, I can't either. And I'll tell students, look, I've got a headache today, so if I'm frowning at you, it's not you, it's me.
It's me.
And they appreciate that. We are humans.
Sounds like a really important study, so good on you for sticking with
Thank you,
it.
yeah.
I guess finally, if you don't mind, I'm just really interested to know what you personally get out of this kind of work with people from different backgrounds. What sort of positive things do you gain from it?
I should have thought about this question beforehand. There's just so many. There's so many. I just feel like my life has been so enriched by working with these students at USQ. Just the richness of their experience. Something that amazes me is how many of my students who are from a refugee background, they're so compassionate. Sometimes when people have really bad experiences, it might make them into meaner people, but in my experience, it has just made them, and maybe they were already compassionate, I don't know, but they are very compassionate, very forgiving, very, very strong, just extremely smart and with a thirst for knowledge, just interesting people.
Yeah.
Interesting people, and I think, Australia could use more refugees because they have, most refugees I've met are the best people I've met.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, they add so much to the
Inspiring.
community and the country. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today,
Oh,
Tori,
that's all right.
Good luck with your study.
Thank you.
So we've just listened to Tori's story, Warren, and it's very interesting her perspective on teaching English, and especially as a second language to refugees and students from not English background. What did you find most interesting about it?
Yeah, Sogol, it was an amazing conversation. I'm so glad that we could chat with Tori, particularly to hear how she really sees each of the students as an individual. I think that's such an important thing. Sometimes we think of, we just have this word, they're refugees or they're migrants or they're foreigners. And we tend to think of people, I think, sometimes as a group.
Yeah.
But I love the way that she was talking about just speak to them, get to know them as an individual. And you don't need to have 15, different degrees on how to relate to a person. You just relate to a person, right?
Of course.
So I found that really interesting. Now, you listened into the interview as well. What stuck out for you?
One of the interesting things I found that she reflected on her own trauma back in Japan when she used to teach English, and especially during the Fukushima disaster. And then when she came back to Australia and she started realizing that with her students, and then she started her PhD, which is all about teaching English, and I guess it's called
Trauma-informed English language teaching.
Interesting, yeah.
Really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to reading it when it is finally published. The other thing that really struck me, I think, is that, for Tori, she's obviously really committed, right? She's not just sitting in the classroom, I've got to teach another class, etc., etc. And I thought that was really encouraging as well, because it's not easy being a teacher, It's,
of course, and I guess these things that I always believe in, teaching English or teaching any language or teaching itself doesn't need to be really in this complicated way. It's more of finding it interesting and making it really fun thing to do. And I think this is what exactly she's trying to do, and she's doing, obviously.
Yeah. And the other thing I remember really clearly from talking with Tori was she was saying right at the end when we were talking about the things that she gained from this work, about there's just the incredibly enriching experience it is to meet different people and to learn about different people, to hear their stories, And so even though she's obviously working very hard as a teacher and giving a lot in terms of supporting particularly people from different language backgrounds, a lot of refugees and people like that, for her is also the receiving that learning new things and having a really enriched life.
Yeah. Something else that I find is really interesting, that people need to be close to, international students or refugee students to know about their trauma. But this is what we are doing here, Warren.
Yeah.
We bring those stories for people to learn about them and to listen to their experiences. So we don't really need to travel to Iraq or Syria to learn those things, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. We can just pop over the talking over the back fence for some people who actually live right next door to people who've come from very difficult situations.
That's right.
And to not be afraid of it. That's the other thing that Tori was talking about. It's you don't have to worry about how am I going to, I'm not a psychologist. I can't help somebody. Tori, she was talking about these pillars, and one of them is just having relationship and connecting with people. And I thought, well, that's something I could do. That's something you can do. Most of us can, just go and say hi and have a chat.
That's interesting. That's right. One thing that she said that we're all human and we can all act in a way that we're human and we're not different. We can help each other.
Yeah, it was really encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you found it encouraging as well, and it's really great that you could join us, and we look forward to another episode of Who Is My Neighbour?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Who Is My Neighbour? To learn more about the work of You Belong Australia, just head to youbelong.org.au and find out all the ways you can get involved and empower refugees to integrate and thrive. Lastly, would you help support this podcast simply by sharing it with others? You can also write a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Yes, we are a video podcast as well. Well, thanks again for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Who Is My Neighbour?